Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public, and we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Thursday. It is February the 22nd, and that means that it is one of my best friend in the world's birthday. So happy birthday, Nathan. And I called him up, and I said, hey, man, should we celebrate your birthday? 42 is a big year. And he said, I'm on a cruise. I'm on a cruise, and I'm stuck on a beach. And I was like, oh, man. That's rough. That's rough. You're living a tough life, my friend. My buddy goes on more cruises than anybody that I've ever met. I've never seen so many cruises. And apparently he's figured out that trick. Some of you guys know this about like how to work the system so that you're getting free cruises and you just pay the taxes on them because they need people to fill up the seats. I have no idea how that works. Anyhow, I want nothing to do with being locked on a boat with a bunch of strangers and diseases. That's just the kind of guy I am. And speaking of that, it occurred to me today as I was coming in under the wire to get today's show going. And by the way, today's show is going to have some discussion of the sunk cost fallacy. We're going to be talking about more of the Russia situation. And of course, the fact that the Russians are now meddling in our third election. Did you know that? 3 elections in a row, including the most secure election in U.S. history. That's cool. So they're doing that. We're going to get into all that, but I wanted to start with a little personal story. Before we do that, let's say thanks to my buddies over at Catholic Vote, because our first story is going to come from them, and then I'll give you guys a little personal tidbit here. So Catholic Vote, you guys can go to catholicvote.org if you want to support them. Their president is a guy named Brian Birch, who is an awesome guy. He also was the person that handed me that little trophy you guys saw as Catholic Hero of the Year, which is a funny thing to get, or the Catholic Prom King if your name is Tac B in our chat. Guys, you can support them by going and signing up for the Loop and getting the best email, including some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. The Loop email is my favorite. It comes in very early. It's before 6 a.m. here in Central Time. And it's really helpful for show prep, but it's also helpful for just getting a quick skim of what's going on in the world. And Catholic Vote right now is pretty outraged about the St. Patrick's Cathedral thing. I'm going to talk to Brian about that a little further. Today, I am guest hosting the Dinesh D'Souza podcast, so you can look forward to seeing us there. And we're going to talk a little bit about our first story in just a second, which has to do with an anti-Catholic hate group. I think that's the right way to call it. We're going to be playing the same game as the left. And there's a couple instances of that. But check out catholicvote.org. You can support them financially, but you can also just get the email, and you will be well informed. You'll be happy you did. Okay, so here's the quick little personal story. One of my other best friends, who we all know each other, including my buddy Nate, who just had his birthday and who's got a birthday in a couple days here. My best buddy is a pressure cooker. Some of you have the same exact concept. Like, you need pressure in order to hit things. And that means that you only function best when you're on a deadline. How many of you guys can relate to the idea that a deadline allows you to get your work done? I think there's a fair number of us. It's not procrastination. It just there needs to be a deliverable date. I used to always negotiate that when I was working for Warner Brothers. As a finance guy, they'd be like, hey, can you get this thing done? And then I'd go, oh, yeah, for sure. When do you need it? And they would say, oh, it's this time. Fine. Okay. As long as I have a deadline, I could make it happen. Now, my buddy was the same way. And when we were going through college, we were college roommates. And the famous story of how not to work under a deadline is, because, and the reason I say that is because today's show, I literally came in like right under like 2 minutes before we were ready to go live. I just finished everything. I was pushing through. So my buddy would get this thing that he would call the running start. He would be terrible at writing term papers. He was terrible at doing assignments. I think he's probably still terrible at that, even though he's a wonderful person. And so he would write just something to be on the page so it looked like he had stuff going on. So he would write this term paper. And so long and short of it is, he has this term paper due in an Indian Studies and Native American Studies course in Oklahoma with a full-blooded Indian Native American professor This is like 2000, 2001, going back a little ways. And so he writes this paper. He turns it in. And he was historically known for playing rap music on my stereo, by the way. And he would write these things up. And then he would go back and edit the title to be the correct thing. And he would edit the first paragraph to be the correct thing. And then he would turn it in and it would be fine. And so at the end of the semester, the first semester, it's our first semester in college. At the end of the semester, he's ashen-faced. He's absolutely white-faced because he had turned in this paper and it was kind of a tough thing to do and get under the deadline, all this kind of stuff. He comes back in, he's standing in front of his computer and he looks over at me. And I swear to God, like the guy's had no color in his face. He looked like he had seen a ghost or that someone had just stabbed him and bled him out. And I said, what's going on? He's like, my life is over. And you're like, well, that's a pretty intense thing to do. Why is your life over, my friend? And he was like, and he points at the screen of the term paper that he had just turned in to a full-blooded Native American professor. And because he had been listening to Dr. Dre, the title of this paper, by the way, none of the rest of the paper had anything to do with this, but the title of the paper in bold font was Indians Ain't Shit But Hoes and Tricks. That's what he turned in to a Native American professor. He never changed it. He needed that running start. And he was assuming that that would be the worst thing that happened. And he got an A in the class and we never heard anything about it again. We have no idea whether the guy even read the titles. This may tell you a little bit about our higher education system as well, going back to even the early 2000s, state school. I'm not even sure the professor. How would you read that? Or you were just like, man, this guy's ballsy. It was a story. He was writing like a book report. It was like a college level book report. Very silly stuff. All right, let's get into the first story. I'm sorry, I wanted to share that just because every once in a while I let you guys know what kind of a weirdo I am. And I got some funny and strange friends. And I am very much the same way. So we came in under the wire today. We're going to be talking about a story that's truly ugly. And here it is. There's nothing, let's just not even set it. This is coming from my friends over at Catholic Vote. We got a little video that I'll play in 1 second here. I think the way it's reported by Catholic Vote is far more honest. We've been talking about honesty in these things. But local news just basically said that there was a guy and he was arrested for child pornography, and that's it. And he was a public official. In fact, we actually have that video, so let's play that video real quick.
Lieutenant Outagamie County official was arrested today on multiple counts of child pornography and child exploitation charges. Captain Louis Lang from the Jail Division of the Sauk County Sheriff's Office confirmed that Adam Westbrook, previously listed as the Human Resources Director for Outagamie County, was arrested early this morning. Westbrook is being held on 4 counts of sexual exploitation of a child and 4 counts of possession of child pornography. Officials have confirmed that. He's expected to appear in court on Monday.
All right, well, that was kind of a straightforward take on it, right? We didn't hear anything really wild. Let's read the actual story here. On Friday, police arrested members of the Brew City chapter of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, an anti-Catholic drag queen group. These are the same people that you may remember were celebrated with the Los Angeles Dodgers. The guy's name is Adam Westbrook, as was stated in the video little piece there. And he'd been known for working with middle school children as a theater director in Wisconsin, and is now in jail in Sauk County. While Westbrook has yet to be formally charged, I think he has been charged at this point, although, is that correct? Maybe not. The records show that he was arrested on 4 counts of possession of child pornography and 4 counts of sexual exploitation of a child. That's what you just heard. But what does that mean in real words? What it means is something far, far darker. He was working as a paid volunteer. I don't know how you can be that. As the assistant director for the musical in a middle school. How interesting that these creepy types tend to find their way into schools. Why would you do that? Because he's predatory. He served as a music director and a choreographer for the high school musical for another school. And of course, the schools both had to release statements to the families, letting them know what was going on here. Quite interesting is that he'd only been doing that for about 5 months. It was a recent position, and prior to taking that job, he served for 9 months as the Director of Human Resources and Labor Relation in the city of Sheboygan. He led a labor union negotiation and helped the city focus on a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I hadn't heard that one, DEIB initiative, to ensure that the city of Sheboygan was the premier destination for all people. But when he says all people, what he means are, that's right, weird people, fringe sexual orientations. Some significant problems with what's going on there. He's seeking out and attempting to find access to children. Post Millennial showed some pictures of this guy, and then once again, you're seeing there's this strange movement to go after churches, specifically the Catholic Church. You'll notice the Latin Mass. Somebody in my mentions was talking about why the Latin Mass. Why do people have a problem with the Latin Mass? Because it's truly traditional. It goes back thousands of years, 2,000 years. And it does so, it's the thing that demons fear, is what I was told. There's something really interesting about that concept. There's something interesting about someone that chooses to desecrate the concept of a nun and then also wants to go out there. Now, when you see exploitation of a child, the understanding I have, based on reading some of the other articles that are out there in the world, it looks like he was actually creating the child pornography. That he was actually getting around children. And when you sexually exploit a child, it's not just because he had videos of it, which is what we're talking about in the child pornography possession, but the production of it, actually exploiting a child. Just let that sink in for a second. Interesting that person has chosen to name the Catholic Church as their enemy as they go after and try to change the norms. As we said the other day, if you are attempting to normalize something, what it means is that you are now trying to make something that is not normal more common than it actually is. And it's not. It's not normal. We're going to talk a little bit more about trans stuff because one of these stories that's been running around, and my first thing that I did, I woke up this morning and I always open up Twitter and see what sort of cesspool we're dealing with. And we had an entire episode called Higher Raycheck versus the cry bullies, right? The people that cry out and accuse somebody of doing the thing that they're actually doing. And Haya, of course, runs the Libs of TikTok account, which is a famously capable boosting signal of the public comments by the weirdos in this society. What they do is they put something out on TikTok to be celebrated by a small audience of other weirdos, and she just takes that signal and boosts it and says, hey, look, this is what this person says. Oh, and by the way, they're a teacher. Oh, and by the way, they have a public job. Oh, by the way, they are working with children in a daycare or something like that, right? Her whole MO is essentially taking public things. She's not exploiting anybody. She takes public information and she makes it further public. So let's talk about this story right here. This came out of The Independent, British newspaper. British newspaper. The writer is a person called Bevan Hurley. And Bevan has since locked down his Twitter account, which is the opposite of what you want to do when you are a reporter and you want to get your story out. They're quite interesting. It says Oklahoma banned trans student from bathrooms. Now a bullied student is dead after a fight. Next, Benedict died one day after a fight in a school bathroom. Now we're going to get into the weird pronoun game. Their mother, which by that they mean her mother, Sue Benedict, tells Bevan Hurley that the gender fluid teen endured more than a year of abuse for simply being who they were. Again, who she was. Does anyone else find this to be unbelievably complicated to try to read? I'm trying to translate what the story actually is in my mind. And when you use plural pronouns for singular people, it's the most obnoxious abuse of our language. It's hands down the worst for me. All right, this article is so disingenuous and so false that it slurs and slanders, and I guess it's libel because it's in print. It libels Haya by basically insinuating that it is her fault that a 16-year-old is dead because of bullies. And we're going to dig into that just a little bit more. Whenever the Oklahoma teenager, next Benedict, this is the poor girl's name, was bullied for being transgender, her mother, Sue, would encourage the 16-year-old to rise above it, rise above the tormentors. Yeah, that's what you do against bullies. You rise above it. You toughen up. Sticks and stones, right? You've got to be strong. You got to look the other way. These people don't know who you are, is what she told the Independent via phone interview. I didn't know how bad it gotten. The bullying started in earnest in the beginning of 2023, a few months after. Said, here we go. We're going to start coming after people. A few months after, the Oklahoma governor signed a bill that required public students to use bathrooms that match the sex listed on their birth certificate. Now look at the picture on the screen right now. That is an incredibly cute little 16-year-old girl with long hair and rosy cheeks. She looks like an absolute sweet little. She may be wearing a dress shirt that's made for men with a little collar button. But all the pictures of her, she is immediately recognizable by anybody as a female. Whether or not she's okay with that is irrelevant. She has soft features. She looks like a total sweetheart. She looks like she could have been one of my girls. And this is horrible. And this mother affirmed this mental illness, this sad decision, up until the point where apparently a few weeks ago on the 7th of February, a bullying incident happened. There was some violence. She suffered head injuries during a physical altercation. She called back home from school and had beatings, like signs of a beatings, bruises on her face. God, it's really hard to translate the there. so you can actually understand what I'm saying. Scratches on the back of the head, bruises around the eyes, etc., etc. Next told her that she and another transgender student had been in a fight with 3 older girls in the bathroom. Next was knocked to the ground during the fight and hit her head on the floor. Okay, and she was furious because the school didn't call an ambulance. And then she was taken to a Bailey Medical Center for treatment. The police spoke. She was discharged later that night, it sounds like. Went to bed with a sore head, fell asleep listening to music. And then, so that was on the 7th. Then on the 8th, on the afternoon of the 8th, she was getting ready to go to Tulsa for an appointment, unknown what the appointment was, and she collapsed in the family's living room. Now, right there, we have to decide, is this causation? Was there a cause of death that was related? Because they ran the story, and what they said is that it was tied. The next thing they do is they talk about, they being the Independent, talks about the LGBTQ advocacy group described her death as a hate crime, linked to hateful rhetoric spewed by leaders in our state, specifically Libs of TikTok account run far-right social media influencer Haya Reichek, a New York-based former real estate agent, a cause celebre among conservatives because she's been using this Libs of TikTok account to post edited anti-trans videos. Really? That's what we're going to call them? Edited anti-trans videos that target public school teachers and librarians. Oh, you mean like sort of the creepers like Adam Westbrook who target children? So the fact that she exposes potential predators is a problem for these people. By the way, they link this with zero circumstantial evidence even that what happened was even remotely related to Haya's stories. Not even a little bit. And Haya didn't make a comment on it because there's nothing to comment on when somebody dies in a state that you don't live in and has nothing to do with what was going on because a couple of kids may have gotten into a fight. Now, all of this stuff is like wildly disingenuous, is it not? It's awfully strange to think about that. And yet, the story, here's a video of a woman like losing her mind about it. So I want to first say the connection has been made, including in this article and by other people on social media, that she is now related to the death of this poor young girl, who, by the way, of course, was a victim group as well. Not only was she a transgender person, but she was also part of the Choctaw Nation. You're seeing on the screen how Choctaw she looks. So here is this video of a woman ranting about it. This is the common take that I've seen on the political left about this, including this article on The Independent. So it doesn't matter whether you're a mainstream publication or you're some low-level TikToker. Here is the take, and I think the vitriol is pretty appropriate, or at least it's pretty representative right now.
Is waging war on leftist ideologies. One of his more infamous and shitty decisions was appointing the founder of Libs of TikTok to the library board. Haya Reichek, I hope I'm saying that wrong, was appointed because of her very extreme views, very anti-LGBTQ views, despite the fact that she has absolutely no experience as a librarian, isn't a parent, isn't from Oklahoma, and ran one of the most grossly disinformed campaigns on the internet. I believe she was a realtor in Brooklyn, but Ryan Walters hired her because he has promoted videos from Libs of TikTok. And the problem with their incessant hate campaigns against the LGBTQ community is that it has now harmed a member of that community. Next, Benedict was a 16-year-old non-binary student in Owassa, Oklahoma. 3 older girls attacked Nex in the bathroom, and the school didn't send Nex to the emergency room. This was a hate crime. Ryan Walters is directly to blame. The day he appointed the Libs of TikTok creator, Haya Reichek, however the hell you say that legitimized her harmful, dangerous rhetoric that she used as disinformation to wage war against the LGBTQ communities. This video put out by the state specifically calls attention to transgender children, and the fact that they don't believe there's such a thing.
Instead of telling kids that there's 2 genders, it's biology, we have injected radical gender theory into telling kids that there might be other genders. It's dangerous.
No, you're the threat. You're the danger to the safety of the students in your school system. Showing PragerU videos that are full of disinformation, just flat out lies about history, that's dangerous to our students.
That's as much as I can take of this woman. So here you go. That is somebody who has basically drawn a direct line between a guy named Ryan Walters, who is the superintendent of Oklahoma schools, and he wants to just teach, reality, biology, things that we've all known. That was pretty much not controversial up until about 5 or 10 years ago. For some reason, we've gotten to this weird place. And this woman is also going to draw direct parallels. Like these are things that have to be proven. And she can't do that. Why can she not do that? Because she just wants to make it up. Because she has feelings, like many leftists do. She's emotionally committed to an outcome. And then she goes and fills in with whatever fake thing. She's mad about PragerU. Really? Like, of all the things in the world, that's what she's upset about. Here's what's really interesting. CNN actually covered this story, and they were smart enough not to try to draw a link. There's not a single mention of Libs of TikTok in here. Why? Because the Libs of TikTok account is completely unrelated, and the fact that you have a former real estate agent from New York who's now on your library board means nothing. Welcome to politics, lady. That's what it was. It's a straight move to trigger people on the political left because, yeah, she's not a librarian, and yeah, she's not a parent. But you know what she does? She puts out information that's really valuable to children, which is kind of like what libraries are about, are they not? They're about putting information that's valuable out there, and she does a pretty good job of that. She does it in social media. Who cares? What is her influence? Probably nothing. It's a figurehead position. In any case, they go through this entire CNN article, same exact picture, same exact story, died after a fight, and none of these things have to have the false information that it was somehow falsely linked to the Libs of TikTok account, which is at least a little bit refreshing to see CNN not be ridiculous. Now, here's the thing. That woman that we just heard ranting and raving about how this is a hate crime and how that the superintendent of schools in Oklahoma is responsible for it, and that Chaya Reichek is somehow also responsible for the death of a child is really troubling, especially in light of this.
First at 6, new information on the death of an ASO teen that is now making international headlines. Thanks for joining us. I'm Tatum Gwynn.
And I'm Craig Day. We've been following this story since officers reported the teen died one day after a fight at school. Owasso police tell us the initial medical examiner's report shows next Benedict did not die from trauma. News on 6's Reagan Ledbetter is live at Owasso with more from investigators. Reagan?
Craig and Tatum, police say the medical examiner did a complete autopsy on next Benedict, and the result of that is Benedict did not die from trauma. Now, police say they are actively investigating the physical altercation that happened here at Owasso High School involving Benedict and other students that happened back on February 7th. Officers say the fight happened inside a bathroom on the West Campus and was broken up in less than 2 minutes. Police say all students involved were able to walk to the office, but the school nurse later recommended Benedict go to a medical facility for further treatment. Police say the school resource officer interviewed Benedict and their parent at the hospital about the fight. The teen was then released from the hospital later that day, then was brought back the next day for a medical emergency and died. Now, the toxicology report could take a few more weeks, but right now we know the initial medical examiner's report does not show Benedict died from trauma. The medical examiner's full report will tell us their cause of death. Now, Owasso police say...
Oh my God, and he said their cause of death. Disgusting. Listen, did you hear that? Multiple times repeated. No physical trauma was related to the actual death. So it's as likely as not as she overdosed on pills. It's as likely as not as she died of some sort of natural causes. That family, I imagine, are probably vaccine people. A lot of kids die suddenly. It's awful. It's atrocious. It's the saddest thing that can happen. A 16-year-old, really, seriously, a beautiful young little girl who was highly confused and was being played into by a mother, Sue Benedict, who's listed in this story, just lost her child and likely had something to do with the fact that her ideas are terrible. I said likely because we don't know for sure. There's nothing natural or normal about a 16-year-old just dying. But it wasn't trauma. It wasn't from the 2-minute fight. Could you die from a 2-minute fight? 100%. Yes, you can. They were all on their feet. Could you still die from that? This reminds me of that Sicknick story, by the way. It's like we're going to come out with this narrative. We're going to push it all the way forward because it benefits our interest. And when the facts are inconvenient, what do? Remember the illusory truth fallacy or the illusory truth effect that we talked about yesterday. It's been repeated. There's repeating of it all over the place. And now you have local news coming out and saying, sorry, look, who knows? If there had been no fight and she had died, then what we would have called it on. She just died from the fear or the sadness of being discriminated against. Truly awful. It's truly awful. And it means that we can't trust a lot of the sources out there because, one, they all have an agenda. Now, I did a long Twitter space yesterday. I'm going to talk about that in just 1 second, and we're actually going to relate it to what we just talked about here. Let me say first thanks to Contingency Medical because I brought them up during the space. I did a space about Idaho and contingencymedical.com. You guys can go to contingencymedical.com with the promo code KYLE. They're based out of Idaho. They're based out of Boise, I've been told there's no Z in Boise. I can't call it Boise. I have to call it Boise. That sounds right. Contingency Medical, fantastic idea. Take your medical care back into your own hands. Use my promo code to get so they know that we sent you over there. What do? You get a telehealth visit with a board certified physician in your state. You get an actual pharmacy sending you off this pack right here, like this, that you can carry. It's very small. Look at that. That's the thinness of it. You throw it in your bag when you're traveling, and then you don't have to be on death's doorstep feeling awful and miserable like Steve Friend is right now. Because when you start feeling sick, what do? You go to the book. You can text, or you can go to the back and forth sort of telehealth option you have with the physician if you don't know. But whatever it is, a respiratory tract infection, if it's a bladder infection, if you feel like you have cellulitis, a skin infection, yeah, there's all the options on there. And because it's Contingency Medical, there's a backup plan too. They're giving you multiple rounds, multiple courses of antibiotics that you can go and take control of your own medical care. Most of us have lost faith in these institutions. There's a reason why this kind of stuff, I think, is the future of a lot of medicine. And look, if we lived in Mexico and you could just walk into a pharmacy and pick up any of this stuff, that'd be a different animal. We live in the United States. We got a lot of rules. Contingencymedical.com, promo code Kyle. Guys, check them out if you want. And I think you should. I mean that. Because these people are crazy. Look what they've done. So, all right, we did the space last night. I spent 3 hours all the way up until about midnight, my time, talking about Idaho and talking about the Patriot Front situation. In fact, some of you will remember we did an entire show called They're All Feds, ? Are they all feds? And so we got into that last night. We talked about it. One of the things that is most revealing and why it's connected to what we just talked about with both the sexual predator who's got the anti-Catholic bias and this story about Haya in Oklahoma and this poor girl who just died. One of the issues is this. There is a woman that is driving the prosecution and driving the DOJ's interest in the Patriot Front, who wrote the search warrant. And I talked about it last night, so I'm going to bring it up again here today. The woman you see on the screen is a woman named Tracy Whelan. She's an assistant United States attorney, which is to say a line federal prosecutor. And according to the people that I know in the area, she apparently has a transgender child. And she was also marching around, quote unquote, on patrol as a federal prosecutor. Now, you might think, well, what role does a federal prosecutor have in the law enforcement realm other than dealing with court and filings and pleadings and going back and forth with briefs? Do they have any role in the enforcement end of DOJ's mission? The answer is no, she does not. But Tracy Whelan was on patrol at the Pride demonstration, which included drag queens and things like this, people just like Adam Westbrook, in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, when the Patriot Front guys jumped out of that truck and then were all arrested before they did anything and charged with conspiracy to riot. She has a vested interest. She is compromised in so much as she has an interest in the outcome and therefore should have removed herself with a conflict of interest in that prosecution. Instead, what she did is she pushed a search warrant for those phones. It went to good agents who were on the front lines who refused to do it because there was no probable cause that a federal crime had been committed. This is what we expect our FBI agents to do. And the people in that office did the right thing. Then their supervisor, a gentleman who was known as the supervisory, the senior supervisory resident agent. I believe that's what SSRA stands for. It's the top person in that small satellite office. His name was Zach Stoffskal. And Zach said no as well. And he was fired for his troubles. Now, this goes back a little ways. This is not like this year's story. But we have a woman right there, heavyset, white, liberal, activist. The thing you see on the screen is that she was hosting a United Against Hate training center where they're talking about Confederates and the 13th Amendment and when the Civil War was, a brief history of hate in this country, which she is obviously quite invested in. And then she was marching around at a pride parade and decided that there was a crime that happened even though there was no crime. They couldn't get the decent agents in the Coeur d'Alene resident agency to sign off on this stuff. Do you know who they had sign off on it? A woman by the name of Kathleen Miller, who was another supervisory special agent from the FBI out of the Boise office. I'm trying to say it correctly every time now. And that woman, turns out, Kathleen Miller, is a lesbian. Now, isn't it interesting when your sexual preferences and your sexual ideology and this gender theory stuff that you're pushing on children also affects your DOJ and gets thrust down the throats of those people, and it actually has real world consequences, not just for the Patriot Front folks. This is an issue for civil liberties. Because if you can't have opinions that we all agree are crappy, if you're not allowed to be an a-hole in this country, the First Amendment has no meaning. I saved and taped the entire space. We streamed it here to Twitter. And because some of you are absolutely madmen and women, over 500 of you watched it live last night. We had something like 200 people or 250 people on the space on the Twitter side of it. We had over 500, almost 600 watching it live, which is crazy because I didn't announce it. And it was, at night. But sure enough, many of you saw it and watched it. If you want to watch it, it's 3 hours long. You can skip through it. I was kind of on a tear, and I definitely went on a bunch of monologues about all this stuff. But there's a big problem when you have a vested interest. And what it reminded me of is this video that's been sitting on my desktop for days. I didn't know why I downloaded it, but I knew it was a problem. I want you to look at the similarities of this heavy-set woman, this like rotund person who is a DOJ prosecutor that supposedly has a trans child, which I think is you encouraging mental illness. Oftentimes, I feel like it is actually a mental illness of the parent. It's like a Munchausen type situation. And man, you tell me if you don't see the similarity in this little video clip. I'm not going to play all of it, but let's get a little taste here.
So I had to do some investigating. I had to do some serious inward discovery and realize that nobody can make you be LGBTQ. Nobody can make you gay, queer. Nobody can make you trans. She was born this way. My other daughter was born that way.
You feel that way, Georgie?
Yeah, completely.
What do you say to somebody who thinks that? That this was brought on you, or this was...
I think you have a dangerous mindset that their ideals and opinions are hurting a community that is already hurting.
When you first heard the term transgender, what did you think?
I thought that's me.
Why?
I don't know. I've never really, I was never uncomfortable with identifying as a boy. It was just, when I heard it, I realized I would be much more comfortable.
When she said, I'm transgender, it clicked with me. It made perfect sense. She may never have felt those inconsistencies when she was younger, but I saw them. So
I want to puke right now listening to that woman. How many of these fat, lib, narcissistic white women, we just talked about race the other day, and it's not the problem. I'll tell you what, there's something really, really wrong in this country with those women. How much of that was about her, the mom? She led off with it. I had to really do some soul searching. I had to think about myself and all these things. And then I went and I pushed all my crazy ideas and my need for acceptance because of my ugly, fat face on this beautiful little boy who looks like a hostage. Have you ever seen anybody that's been coached to do testimony? Because I've seen it. Have you ever seen anybody that is lying because they are in a presence where they don't feel safe to be able to say that thing that is actually true? We've all seen this if we're parents. We've all seen it. Even if it's just your own kid lying to you because they think they can't tell you the real truth because they know they're going to get in trouble for it, that kid looked like a hostage. And where's the dad? Tac P just said it. Why isn't the dad in the picture? Why is that weak male not standing up and saving his son? Dads, if you're letting this stuff happen, like, what is your line? I said it the other day about Uvalde. I've said it a number of times. What are you saving it for? If you're not willing to put down your life for your own children, when you have a lunatic like that woman destroying the body and the mind and the soul of your child, of your offspring, what on earth are you about? Just forget about turning in your man card. You've already shredded it. It doesn't exist. There is something inherently unmasculine about doing that. If we're not going to all agree on protecting the innocence of childhood, like, that's the entire purpose of Western civilization. That's literally what we're all about. It's disgusting to me. It makes me nauseous, but it also makes me understand where these people come from, because they are pushing something that is about them, and they are more than happy because they're so self-centered to take it on themselves. And that same problem exists in our DOJ. When these crazy narcissists, I don't know what else to call it. I'm not a clinician, but I can pretty much, notice when people are so focused on themselves that they make everybody else acknowledge their BS reality. And if you're going to take that into criminal prosecutions, by the way, and you're going to ruin the lives of good men who actually believe in the oath of their office, who did the thing that you expect them to do, like as a default position, and then you're going to bring in you know what the craziest thing about this Kathleen Miller story is? She's on record in a deposition saying she would have signed off on the search warrant without even reading it because she knew there was probable cause before she had read the affidavit saying what the probable cause was. That's an activist. We cannot have activist FBI supervisors signing search warrants to deprive people of their God-given civil liberties, regardless if those people are horrible, crappy human beings. It's so gross. And of course, we're going to get deeper into what's going on with my ex-girlfriend here. My ex-girlfriend is doing this little song and dance, playing again into that Russia conspiracy game, where apparently we're going to now revise history and we're going to just embrace the cognitive dissonance. We're going to go right over the top of it, and we're going to kind of cover a little piece of that too. We're going to go right through the fact that we've had a Donald Trump, Republican, elected in 2016. Apparently, we had a Joe Biden, if you believe them, the most safe and secure election in 2020, which we don't. And now we have a third election that is now threatened by Russia. Apparently, Russia is threatening all the elections. Here's the thing. Russia's been trying to meddle in U.S. elections since Russia has been able to meddle in U.S. elections. What you have to prove is that it actually matters and that it actually can move the needle and that it has any effect and that there's actually a crime involved in that, which oftentimes there is not. All right, before I get too riled up here, let me, we're getting there. Let's say thanks to 4 Patriots. 100% agree that we need to be preparing so you're not repairing. You can tell there's a lot of evil stuff. We are going to have some unrest. It doesn't matter whether you live in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, in a small place, whether you live in Las Cruces, New Mexico, like I used to, whether you're in New York City or whether you're in San Francisco. It's coming for you regionally, locally, or nationally. And one way or another, you want to make sure that you have a stockpile of calories so you're not having some emergency-based thinking and your own irrational problems. Go to 4Patriots, the number 4patriots.com/Kyle. Again, 4patriots.com with the promo code Kyle so that you can prepare, and that way you don't have to repair and worry about whatever disaster's coming your way and try to make plans on the moment. Our best plans are always made, even if they're under pressure. You might be under pressure right now. They're made before the chaos hits you. When the chaos hits you, all bets are off. Anytime that you end up in that situation where you know you're already behind the 8 ball, you're going to make more irrational and worse decisions. You might end up with a term paper that says Indians ain't something. Go to 4patriots.com/Kyle. Prepare yourself. Don't be one of those people who gets caught off guard last minute. All right, let's keep going with this. I have this bizarre theory right now about what's going on. This sunk cost fallacy. We talked yesterday about how there's this illusory truth effect. That is to say that if somebody repeats something over and over again, you believe it's true simply because it's human nature, that when you hear things, oftentimes you believe they're true. So here we go. This goes back to 2016, before the election, but this is the FBI's most wanted Russian interference in 2016 elections. And you're thinking to myself, you're like, oh, okay, fine. Is there actually a most wanted situation? Conspiracy to commit an offense against the United States, false registration of a domain name, aggravated identity theft, conspiracy to commit money laundering. Weird. None of those things are actual effects. Nobody was deprived of rights. It's a conspiracy to do these things, which means they didn't actually happen. And who did they go after with this? Who did they indict in the District of Columbia, of all places? Do you want to know? On July 13, 2018, 2 years, by the way, after the so-called election interference of 2016, a federal grand jury in District of Columbia indicted 12 Russian military intelligence officers. Are we being serious right now? The FBI brought together an indictment with the United States Attorney's Office in D.C., and they indicted 12 military officers of the Russian government for interfering with the 2016 elections. They name them. The indictment has 11 defendants. They're all military officers, some of which they don't even have pictures of. These are all like stock photos in uniform. Do you know what the odds of the FBI being able to arrest any of these people? None. It's zero. This is cosplay, as my buddy Steve Friend and I have often talked about. They love to indict people they have no ability to go and reach out and touch for gaining illegal access to U.S. persons and entities' computers, aggravated identity theft, false registration of a domain name. Give me a break. Conspiracy to commit money laundering without actually doing the money laundering. This is what they indicted them on. And my favorite is this, and I left it on the screen so you guys can see it. These individuals should be considered armed and dangerous, an international flight risk, and an escape risk. They're not coming to the United States. Are you out of your flippin' minds, people? Come on now. What are we even talking about? This is the silliness that we have in this country when you have that sort of thing showed up. So what happens next? 2020, same story. This is this one's coming from New York Times. And there's also another one that came out of CBS. I have a number of these stories. Let's just read it real quickly, just a couple little pieces of it from the New York Times version. FBI director warned anew on Friday. This is coming from April of 2019, calling it a significant counterintelligence threat that Russia will continue to meddle in America's election. Well, did they or didn't they, folks? You see how hard it is to be able to believe things that are not true? Look, either they meddled in the election and then all the elections are suspect, and so we can't say that they were the most secure that ever happened, or they didn't. Or they always try and it doesn't really matter because they're unable to actually move the needle because we live in America and that there's always information that's competing for our eyeballs. The Trump administration has come to see that the Russia's influence operations have morphed into a persistent threat since what? I don't know, since the Soviets kind of like showed up on the scene. The FBI and the intelligence agencies and the Department of Homeland Security made a permanent task force to create and confront the 2018 midterm election interference. Yeah, that was a good move there. We recognize our adversaries are going to keep adapting and upping their game. We are very much viewing 2018 as a dress rehearsal for the big show in 2020, he said in remarks to the Council on Foreign Relations. And this came just in the wake of the Mueller report, which laid out in detail hundreds of pages of the interference and influence campaigns carried out by Russian operatives in 2016 that apparently didn't do anything. If you read the Twitter files, the people that actually did the real back end of it, the things that were being alleged, didn't actually happen because they couldn't actually track that one, that they were actually Russian accounts, or two, that they actually did anything, which is a big deal. We're just making it up as we go along. And so that led me to today's headline, which showed up on CNN, which is my absolute favorite whenever I see this kind of stuff. Third U.S. election appears to be falling prey to Putin. And you're not going to believe who did it, but it's Stephen Carlson, who, like I said, he is like a co-writer of the show. Stephen Carlson's analysis piece. I don't know why they call it analysis at this point. Putin looms over third successive U.S. election. The third one in a row. Well, is it really the third election in a row, or are we talking about 2016? Because we had a 2018, we had a 2022 midterms. So does he mean presidential? They don't have to worry about that. Russia is literally what CNN has on their byline. Ex-President Donald Trump's scathing catchphrase for the torrent of investigations into his administration serves as an apt catch-all for the current meltdown over Moscow that is roiling U.S. politics. The United States may have been beaten. Now, it may have beaten the Kremlin in the Cold War and ever since regarded Moscow as a mere irritant, albeit one with nuclear arms. No, I think we've actually shown that they've literally never given up on the idea that Russia is our number one threat. Except when Barack Obama wanted to go after and make fun of Mitt Romney, right? That's the only time it happened. This is the old, the 1980s called and they want their politics back, their foreign policy back. Russia and its leader, whom Joe Biden has described as a crazy SOB, that silly Joe Biden, Vladimir Putin has trained the malevolence of his intelligence agencies and his military power, his global diplomacy, and his objective statecrafts as a multi-front assault on American power in the United States. Oh, that sounds very, very scary. He's an ex-KGB lieutenant colonel, conceived of a grievance after watching the Soviet Union fall apart from East Germany, and that sparked a single-minded effort to discredit and weaken the United States. Or possibly the United States never let the Cold War go, and he's been basically acting appropriately for his interests, which are not our interests, by the way. It's not good for us. But how much do we bear responsibility as a nation? It's foolish to think otherwise. Absolutely foolish to think that this is not somehow related. And so it led me to something that is known as the sunk cost fallacy. And I want to talk a little bit about that. Yesterday, we talked about the frequency of repetition gives us something. There's another piece to it, which I actually brought up and I had a conversation with my father about. The idea is that once people have committed to that repetition, once they have decided that there is an illusory truth that they are now holding on to, it becomes incredibly difficult for them to let it go. And there's a couple of reasons why. Number one is probably ego. There's actually an entire article, which I think I have up here. Give me 1 second. There it is. This is an article that was written in 1969. It's an academic paper that talks about something that is referred to either as commitment bias, or it's something that discusses the effect of public commitment on your opinion. And what it essentially does is that once you've come forward with a public opinion, you will in fact harden yourself and will not be able to let it go. And what does that come from? There's a theory of cognitive dissonance that they referenced in this, coming from 1957. The cognitive dissonance theory essentially says that even though things may not agree in your own mind, there is a conflating problem. And that problem is that you've actually committed to something and now you don't want to give it up. Why? All kinds of reasons. We're dealing with that. And the second version of it is sunk cost. And sunk cost is not foreign to us. The sunk cost fallacy is actually really important. If you're playing poker, it's known as the sunk cost fallacy kind of becomes pot committed. There's a concept that they talk about. You've put so much money into the pot that now you are now required to continue out and see out the hand, even though you are now chasing, essentially, the shortest version of sunk cost is you are chasing bad money, or you're chasing good money with bad. You know that you're wrong, but you can't help but go after it anyway. And why would you do that? What would make somebody do something like that? It's quite simple. It describes our tendency to follow through on an endeavor because we've already invested time, money, or effort, and there's also an emotional component to it, whether or not the current costs outweigh the benefits. People are not rational creatures. We turn out to be pretty much emotionally driven, hormonal driven creatures. And so even though we think that we're rational, and sometimes we act in rational ways, it's actually contrary to a lot of our programming. And that's kind of what psychology has revealed. The sunk cost fallacy says, because you've been doing it, you're going to keep doing it. And the worst part for most people is if they didn't do that thing, they would have to admit they're wrong. And that's really hard to do. That's part of that commitment to these ideas. I'm going to give you some examples. Individual effects. These are worth looking at. Okay. Individual effects in economic terms means you spent $50 on a concert ticket. This is coming from a pretty decent little website doing analysis. That you can't recover one way or another. If you go to the concert, you spend $50. If you didn't go to the concert, you spent $50. So at that point, that $50 is no longer a factor because it's already gone. That's the sunk cost. The fallacy is that you think because you've already spent money on it, now you're going to put additional resources into it. Your time may be money, and you may have an opportunity cost, which is the cost of going to that may actually outweigh that $50, and you are still going to feel like you are weighed down because you've already spent the $50. There's a really interesting little piece they talk about. That's an individual effect. There's a systemic effect they're talking about, and the example they give is the 1956 Supersonic Transport Aircraft Committee, which was building the Concorde jet. Do you remember the Concorde? Like, where did that go? That seemed like a really cool idea. Here's where it went. The British and the French engine manufacturers and their governments were involved in this idea that they were going to have an inter-Atlantic flight, a cross-Atlantic flight, or a transatlantic flight in like an hour. It was going to be the supersonic, like really fast option for people to jump on and go from Europe to the United States. And they sunk in an estimated $100 million, which in that time, 1956 and onward, that was a ton of money. It's not like Joe Biden dollars. But long before the project was over, it was pretty clear that the increasing costs and then the minimal financial gains of the plane would not offset the actual project. They wouldn't actually make a win on it. They weren't going to be able to be financially viable doing this particular project. And yet the project continued anyway. That's like a great metaphor for government, by the way. When government gets involved, all of the metrics make no sense whatsoever. The manufacturers and the government followed through on the project because they'd already made significant financial investments and they dedicated a lot of time and money. These are the bridge to nowhere ideas. These are the supersonic trains that you dump like $2 billion in. You only get a few feet of track and then you're like, oh God, we have to keep putting more in. This is classic government thinking. The sunk cost fallacy is very well rooted in human psychology, and people don't want to feel like they were made a fool of, and they don't want to have a loss. They have another thing that's called commitment bias. And commitment bias is essentially saying that you've committed to something. It's a psychological tendency that you feel tied or committed to things that we've already said or did in the past. So the sunk cost is also sort of related to this thing that the sunk cost comes from the fact that we committed some of our resources to something. And when you've done that, you now have this desire for consistency. You want to appear consistent. You want to appear like you didn't make a bad decision. How many people in this country right now are dealing with that with their decisions based on vaccines? I don't know why. I don't know if that ties back to what happened in Oklahoma, but think about that. If you accept that vaccine makes no sense. We had this conversation with my mother-in-law the other day, and it was like, why do you need to have a child tested for COVID before you go home if you guys all got the shots? What's the purpose of the shots? Doesn't it prevent COVID? And they're like, well, it doesn't prevent COVID anymore. It just keeps you from dying from it. It's like, okay, so you might get COVID, but you're safe. Why are you scared of it? You're scared of getting sick at all? Like, that's just a risk when you go into public, when you deal with human beings. There's a real possibility you could get sick. You could go to the grocery store and deal with somebody who's working through illness. It happens all the time. But because you would have to admit that the thing that you did had no benefit, and then on top of that, you actually persecuted people and you got aggressively crappy about it. Some of this stuff is really well played out in our news cycle. I've got a video of Adam Schiff. You guys will cringe a little bit about it, but I think it has a lot to do with this sort of Russia piece. We continue to see more examples of people that refuse to give up on a narrative. They are committed. They have this sunk cost fallacy. And then the other piece of it is, as we just said a second ago, there's a big chunk that has to do with that sort of holding on to that public commitment. The effect of public commitment is strong. Here's Adam Schiff not giving up, even though he's on Tucker Carlson, getting destroyed He's a dishonest human being, and he reveals himself, sadly, as he tries to stay with that public commitment.
You're on the Intel Committee. Let me just ask you one final question. Can you look right into the camera and say, I know for a fact the government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of John Podesta's email?
Absolutely. The government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of our institution and the dumping of information.
Of John Podesta's email.
Not only in the United States, but also in Europe.
Okay, you're not, you know what, you're dodging.
And Tucker,
no, look and say, I know they did. John Podesta's emails, they hacked those.
And I think that Ronald Reagan will be rolling over his grave at your carrying water for the Kremlin.
I'm not carrying water for the... You're a sitting member of Congress on the Intel Committee, and you can't say they hacked...
You're gonna have to move your show to RT Russian television because
you know what?
This
That's
is perfect.
Just so
this is
beneath your
placed.
office because it's so dumb and you're being duplicitous. I'm asking you, did...
It's so dumb and you're being duplicitous. I actually really enjoyed that. I enjoyed Tucker Carlson pushing back. We don't always see that. Most of the time, it's one-sided because it's in the echo chamber. It's people that are already affirming things that other people already believe. They are just repeating the falsehood. It's nice to see a little bit of a pushback. Did that move the needle for anybody other than Tucker Carlson's fans? No. And did they think of anything new? No. They just went like, yeah, we all agree with Tucker. It's the danger of the echo chamber. It's the danger of that illusory sort of truth effect. It keeps getting committed. The reason why the other side... each side, right and left, will not say things that are being said on the other side is because you're going to interrupt that repetition and you're going to build a rep that is the opposite. And if you had even repetitions of things that didn't agree with each other, then people wouldn't know what the illusory truth was, would they? They wouldn't understand the narrative. They wouldn't be able to just take it and think for themselves. Here's something coming out of MSNBC, kind of fun. What we're pushing is, like I said, not just is Russia somehow involved in these elections, even though we had the most safe and fair and free election in 2020 that's ever happened. They can't have it both ways. It's contradictory. There should be cognitive dissonance. Those are the two ideas that you have in your head that run into each other at full speed that don't agree with each other. The whole idea, my father-in-law is great for this. He used to say, there's no reason that you should own a firearm and nobody should trust the police. Those two ideas are incongruous. They cannot meet together and be harmonious. Because if the state is the only one that owns firearms and you can't own them, but the state can't be trusted, then what the hell are you telling me? That you want the only people that have the means of lethal force to be the people that you don't trust? That's crazy. That's a crazy concept. And he deals with that all the time. And so a lot of people on the political left are doing that. The only reason why the political right is not so aligned and why we have some disagreements and why we don't move the ball forward so often is because we actually are trying to entertain ideas that sometimes don't agree with each other. And we're like, oh, I don't know the right answer. They always know the right answer. It's whatever the party pushes out. And it looks something like this.
For years, the right wing has been running a sketchy, tawdry political operation to find and prosecute any wrongdoing by the president's son, Hunter Biden. He has been targeted in what is essentially a political hit job intended to inflict pain upon his father. He is facing criminal charges by a special prosecutor in the Department of Justice that many experts say would never be brought against anyone who is not the son of the president. Now, some of the most serious claims leveled against Hunter Biden have to do with his work for a Ukrainian energy company called Burisma and alleged payments they made to the Bidens, plural. You see, Republicans have been yelling from the rooftops about Burisma and alleged bribes paid not only to Hunter Biden, but to Joe Biden, to the man himself, the president of the United States, who was then vice president. That idea of illicit, secret, seven-figure bribes to the man who's currently president has been the central point of their whole attack. And today, in the most spectacular embarrassment imaginable, it blew up in their faces. You see the special counsel, Republican appointee, leading the case against Hunter Biden, who was appointed by Donald Trump, now says that that guy, this informant they hung their entire claim on about the bribe, he lied.
All right, let's cut away from that. Here's the indictment. Grand jury returns indictment charging FBI confidential human source with felony false statements and obstruction. These are two charges, one of them under 18 U.S.C. 1001, which is weak and bullshit. Nobody gets charged with that unless there is a more powerful charge. And the other one is 18 U.S.C. 1519, creating a false or fictitious record. Now, I didn't know this because I've been lazy and hadn't read this, so I'm going to straight up admit this. I did not realize that this source, who I assumed, falsely assumed, by the way, was a counterintelligence source because of the type of materials, was actually providing information on criminal investigations. That is a critical thing to discuss. This person, this CHS, Alexander Smirnov, apparently knew information that he provided to criminal investigations. He was used to provide them, and his handler advised him that he'd have to testify in court on multiple occasions, including but not limited to October of 2010, May of 2011, October of 2012. This is crazy. April of 13, August of 13, July of 15, March of 2020. The defendant knew that the information he was providing was used in criminal investigations because the defendant participated in a number of operations where he was authorized to engage in otherwise illegal activity, also known as OIA. That means you're authorized by the United States Attorney to do things that are illegal. Now, you have somebody who we're saying was involved in multiple criminal prosecutions, who provided information, has been admonished as such, and then lied about something? Does that discredit everything else that was said? Did they investigate all the other claims? Did they overturn? Were these things declared mistrials? Are they getting a new trial because of the information that was provided? How central to the criminal prosecutions that this guy was involved in, how central was it? Let's say he's discredited. Let's take it at their face and say that this person is now discredited. You have 10 years and upwards of $100,000 committed by the FBI, our federal government, in an investigative way that now finds out, suddenly, whenever he came out with a political allegation against the Obama and Biden administrations, that this is a problem. Now suddenly this guy is facing charges, and he comes up with a news story that he was getting it from Russian intelligence sources. That seems pretty sketchy and suspect. And then you have guys like Chris Hayes on MSNBC screaming about how this is the sole basis for what they're hanging their hat on for this prosecution, for this investigation into the Bidens and their corruption. It's hard because they'd already admitted that this person was a credible source not just a few days ago. It makes this look really bad. Here's Jamie Raskin admitting that, this was a credible source, and there's no reason why you wouldn't think otherwise. Here you go.
Yeah. So he also described this source as being highly credible and someone that has been paid 6 figures for the information that they've been able to provide the Bureau through the years. Would you say that that was accurate in your impression as well?
Yeah, there's a confidential human source that the FBI works with who has proven to be very credible, who reported a conversation with someone else.
Okay. So he was credible or he wasn't credible. That's hard to kind of square. Let's say he wasn't credible. Now you've got James Biden, the brother of the president, who's out there talking about something. What's he doing? He's saying that he never had any business involvement. His brother never had any dealings in his business. James Biden, president's younger brother, told lawmakers in a closed-door deposition before the House Oversight Committee on Wednesday that the president has never had any involvement or any direct or indirect financial interest in the family's business venture. The key point the Republicans are disputing in their ongoing impeachment inquiry of Joe Biden. He appeared before the GOP-controlled panel, said it has scores of bank records and witness statements and so on and so forth. He's a witness at the center of these allegations. Here he is. You just heard Chris Hayes say that it was a spectacular blow up. If only they didn't just hang their hat on this 1023 from this now so-called discredited FBI source. If only there was somebody else that had said this sort of thing. If there had ever been any kind of allegations or there were any kind of records that could be done, it's almost like this never happened.
I've heard Joe Biden say that he's never discussed business with Hunter. That is false. I have firsthand knowledge about this because I directly dealt with the Biden family, including Joe Biden. In late 2015, I was approached by James Gilliar, whom I had known for many years, about joining him in a deal which he said would involve the Chinese state-owned enterprise CEFC China Energy, and what he called one of the most prominent families in the United States. I was informed first by Gilliar, and then by Hunter Biden, and by Rob Walker, who was working with the Bidens, that the Bidens wanted to form a new entity with CFC, which was to invest in infrastructure, real estate, and technology in the U.S. and around the world. And the entity would initially be capitalized with $10 million, and then grow to billions of dollars of investment capital. After months of discussion, I agreed at Gilliar and Hunter Biden's request to become CEO of the entity to be called Sinohawk. On May 13, 2017, I received an email concerning allocation of equity, which says 10% held by H for the big guy. In that email, there's no question that H stands for Hunter, big guy for his father, Joe Biden.
All right, there's more of that. You guys know what I'm talking about. No, that's not Chris Farley. He didn't come back. That's not fat guy in a little coat. That's Tony Bobolinsky. You remember him? Holy moly. The news cycle moves so fast. It's almost like we didn't have IRS whistleblowers coming out and saying that there was all this other kind of corruption that was going on. It's almost like none of that ever happened. Remember Gary Ziegler? Is that his name? Not Gary Ziegler. Ziegler was the other guy. Anyhow, there are 2 IRS whistleblowers that came out and did this. It's pretty obvious that there was something going on. What that thing is should be properly investigated. And for them to pin it all on something. This is a straw man, by the way. And I'm not even sure that I believe the FBI, because the FBI doesn't say things that make any sense. Either there was all kinds of election or interference, or there wasn't. Is Joe Biden legit or not? These are all problems that, like, when they look into it, there are internal conflicts. There's cognitive dissonance in that narrative, one way or another. It turns out on the other side, it's pretty easy to say. It's like Russia didn't have that much to do with the elections. It could have been stolen domestically. That's pretty easy to line up with. The fact that the Bidens have millions and millions of dollars with no discernible business and no deliverables, that seems really suspect. That seems like something that's a real problem. And then the fact that the guy is a drug addict and all the other kind of crazy things. Plus, you got Tony Bobulinski out there saying, hey, what upside? Tony Bobulinski is not a good dude. He's not a good, decent human being. We have some inside knowledge here. The suspendables have some experience. We'll leave it at that. He's a dirtbag. Being a dirtbag, however, doesn't mean that you're a liar. There's plenty of dirtbags that are sources. Case in point, FBI source. And how weird to change your story to Russia after you've been indicted when it seems like that would actually benefit a leftist narrative. It seems very problematic. I don't like it at all. It makes me sick. And yet, it's just like, it's symptomatic of so much of this stuff. It's people that can't accept. They've already committed to it. And so now everything that comes down the pike, they're going to have to jump on it, even if it makes no sense, even if the cognitive dissonance sort of is on there, because they have this sunk cost fallacy. They have sunk in, and they are basically committed. They are pot committed to this idea. They're going to ride it out to the stupidity, to its inevitable stupid conclusion, which is that they don't make any sense. And that's why, in the same way, so many of our institutions have degraded themselves, because they basically committed to a narrative, and that narrative has been proven false over and over again. Just like that poor girl in Oklahoma. You commit to the narrative when you're wrong, and you're going to be less credible. Like The Independent. Factually inaccurate statements. Really ugly. All right. Gary Shapley. Somebody said it. Thank you so much. The other guy's name was Ziegler. There were 2 guys, Shapley and Ziegler. Well done. Well done, chat. Renzo Rants coming in for the win on that one. I appreciate your guys' assistance. Sometimes I need it. All right. I want to say thanks to my buddies over at Patriot Cooler, people who do not suck, who are not scumbags. They are decent human beings making a good product. This is patriotcoolers.com. You guys can go. This is mine. Right now, I got to fill up. I'm going to hydrate. I've got another interview I'm going to be doing of Brian Birch, who's the president of Catholic Vote. Got to be making that thing happen. I'm going to be drinking from my Patriot Cooler as we tape. Guys, use promo code Kyle, Kyle, save 10%. If you spend $50 or more, you're going to get free shipping at patriotcoolers.com. You can follow them on social media at the same name, at Patriot Coolers. Yeah, they're on True Social. If you guys want to put out a truth with a picture of what you got, I like it. Do the same thing on X if you like. They're also on Instagram. And they have a great looking product. They have OD green, like real army green. That's nice. Sometimes it's like an approximation. That OD looks really good, by the way. It looks good in my gym. And if you guys have not looked at some of their hard-sided or their soft-sided coolers, if you're in the market, that's the place to go. Don't forget my promo code, KYLE, just like everywhere else. Promo code Kyle saves you a little bit of money, lets them know that we sent you. And again, $50 or more, you're going to get free shipping at patriotcoolers.com. Promo code Kyle. You guys like the attack P like that I said that they're not scumbags. They're not. They're not scumbags. They're really nice. They're super nice people, and they're in Houston, Texas, America. Who doesn't love that? All right, that's about it for the day. Guys, kind of an interesting show. Like I said, you got 3 extra hours from yesterday. If you want to go watch that, it's exclusively on Rumble. It's nowhere else. And if you have not gone to rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin and join this channel here, you guys can do that. You can hit the follow button, which is right at the bottom of the chat. You can only do it when you're on the computer terminal. You have to go to that. In the chat, you go to follow, and then you can also subscribe for $5 a month. It comes directly to us. That fills up into a little account, and they pay us once a month from your $5. If you guys want to do it, it's like 22 cents a show. On average. It's less than a quarter a show. If you like what you're getting, we appreciate the support. You don't have to, but if you want to, it gives you a little red bar in the chat and unlocks some emojis if you've joined us live. That's always fun for me as well. I like seeing what you guys are about. Let's do a 5-star review. Again, this show is about what you guys like and what you're into, and I cannot pronounce this. This is MTMKSMRMAA. Come on, some of you guys got to figure out your usernames. That's terrible. I don't know what the says. Must listen, 5 stars. Listen to the podcast. Love the podcast. Kyle gives you the inside info and has great guests. Need more FBI whistleblowers like him to expose the corruption so they too can become an FBI or recovering FBI agent. 2 thumbs up. You know what? I'd love it if that was the case. I don't think it is. And why is that? Because so many of these people have now pot committed to their careers. The actual name for it in the federal service is the golden handcuffs. I don't think we're going to see a whole lot out unless they come out kicking and screaming. Even the people that don't want to. Once they're kicked out, they still want to hide in the shadows because my ex-girlfriend is a very malevolent and vindictive creature. And there's a lot of ugly people just like that gal, Tracy Whelan, or Whalen. Whalen is a good name for her. Yeah, Tracy Whalen. People like that are out there and they're willing to come after you and they're willing to use federal authorities to do evil things. It's not a good place to be, but we'll be back here again. I don't know if we're going to have a Steve Friend Friendly Friday. I hope so. Pray for his recovery. He's not feeling really well. He told me he was on death's door last night and that he sounded like RFK. That's not a good place to be. That's a sick Steve Friend. So we'll hope that he recovers. But if not, we'll be here for a Friendly Friday without Steve Friend, and that's okay too. It'll still be friendly. It'll still be the Friday. We just may not have our buddy Steve Friend. Yes, that's his real name. All right, folks. God bless you. Be safe out there, and we'll see you again real soon in the morning.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram @Kyle Seraphin.